Okay, it's 9:30, so we'll get started so we can get started on time and hopefully finish up on time. This presentation will be recorded and it will be available, I believe, through our website. So that will be available to you. My name on the screen says Mitch Frumkin. I'm obviously not Mitch Frumkin. I am Melissa Rubel with Kipcon. I'm the manager of engineering at Kipcon. I am involved with site work projects largely. A lot of them have to do with asphalt. So that's what we'll be talking about today. I am going to go ahead and screen share at this time. All right, can everyone see? Oops. Can everyone see my screen share?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just turn on the chat here so I can see you. All right, I'll try to address questions as we go along. If I don't see your question right away, we'll certainly get to it at the end. So today's presentation has to do with asphalt remediation. As you know, asphalt is a bituminous material as opposed to a concrete material, meaning that it's there's a mixture of stone and some binding asphalt material, and it's obviously installed in roadways, driveways, access roads, and several other places. So we're specifically talking about asphalt today as opposed to concrete or another type of surface. So what is the roadway pavement made of? And today's presentation will largely deal with roadways. Obviously, pavement is asphalt's installed in driveways as well. And we'll just kind of touch on that a little bit. But this will be more of a presentation that's geared toward a larger roadway project where you have several layers of asphalt. So a flexible asphalt is made of several layers. I have a question. Will the PowerPoint presentation be made available? Yes, it will. It's made of several layers. There's obviously the earth underneath, the sub-base course, which oftentimes is an aggregate, or it's another name for stone or sand, or a mix of stone, sand, and stone dust. Sub-base courses are oftentimes what's called a dense graded aggregate. And it's a mix of several different sizes of aggregate that, when it's compacted, it's waterproof and for the most part, and provides a very stable subbase for pavement courses on top. Above the subbase course is the base course, which is the first bituminous course that gets put down. It's typically around 4 inches thick, and it has a larger stone in it than the surface course. So it's meant to be a structural layer in the pavement, as is the subbase. And the base course and the subbase together are really what's providing the structure, the strength and the structure of your pavement. On top of that is the surface course, and it's often called the wearing course. And although it does provide some structure to the pavement, it's meant to take the wear and tear of the roadway, and that's the layer that gets milled off and replaced as part of a pavement project. So communities will often discuss when is the best time to replace their pavement. They can see that the pavement's getting older. They look at the reserve study and they say, well, it's almost been 20 years now. And maybe we need to do something, or my goodness, it's only been 15 years and the pavement's a mess. So there's several factors that a board may take into consideration deciding whether it's time to do a pavement project. So looking at the reserve study can tell you, what the age of your pavement is, and you can compare that to the condition of the pavement. We highly recommend that you engage an engineer in a pavement project, and there's several benefits to that. An engineer will knows what to look for, can do a visual observation of the pavement, and based on certain visual cues that the pavement is giving off in terms of cracking or settlement, or the way that the cracking is occurring and the degree to which it's occurring, can give an engineer an idea of what is going on underneath the pavement and whether you will get much more life out of that pavement. I will say, in consulting your reserve study, if you have not done a reserve study in 3 years or more, I would recommend that you have that study updated, especially if you have a lot of pavement in your community. I will tell you that the cost per square yard in general, on average for pavement projects, has gone up, and not just in terms of inflation, which is also occurring right now, but just in terms of the cost of materials. It has gone up substantially since 2017, 2018. So if you have a reserve study that has not been updated lately, and you have a large ticket item on there like asphalt, you should probably take a look at that before you engage in any sort of pavement project. So boards may also look at timing. In regard to available reserve funds, there may be funding there to do the entire project in 1 year. It may make more sense to phase a project, especially for large communities that it might be very expensive for them to do a pavement project all at once, or it may be very hard to stage a pavement project that's very large. The project can be broken up into several phases that are done over maybe 2 years or 3 years. So the availability of funds can play into that decision as well. The cost of materials obviously is changing all the time. Right now, as you know, prices are going up. So a pavement project next year could potentially cost substantially more than a pavement project this year. I don't know for sure, but typically those prices of asphalt do rise over time, and they seem to be doing that a lot more lately. Also, labor costs change and move. The labor costs may be going up as well. So the timing of your project, whether you try to do it all at once to get the best possible price, or if you need to phase a project, that could impact the cost, because there are mobilization costs involved in the contractor coming back out each year to continue the project. Now, I have a question here. When you say this year, do you mean 2023? Yes. So one of the things to keep in mind is if you're using an engineer, I will oftentimes get a call in July that a community wants to do paving in that calendar year. I will tell you that the best time to plan a pavement project is around now, because the contractors are lining up their schedules for the spring, and it would be very difficult to get a contractor in that quickly. Also, in timing of pavement projects, spring is ideal for doing pavement for several reasons. Number one is the temperature. Number two, you're not racing against the closing of the mills. So planning for a pavement project around this time is great, because you have time to put together the specs, gather your bids, select your contractor, and get on the schedule for the spring. So the cost of asphalt does change, and even if you get bids in the fall, when you actually do the project, the cost of the asphalt may have changed, and the contractor will charge that back to the community in the form of a change order on the invoice. So when we go put pavement projects out to bid, the contractor will reference this asphalt price index actually on the bid. And then when the project is done, they will put the new asphalt price index on their invoice and show what that adjustment is for the price. So that's just in terms of timing. The asphalt price does change, and it's not like you can lock in now for a price. The contractor will charge you back for any changes in asphalt price. I have, in the time I've been doing pavement projects, I have seen one decrease in price that helped the community in the end, but typically the price rises over time. Another change order that I'm seeing on invoices for pavement projects now is the fuel surcharge. So there is also a fuel price index that is referenced by Department of Transportation. So there is a way to see what that change is and compare it to what the contractor is charging you for fuel. So at some point, the board typically needs to explain to the community why they have chosen to do a pavement project at any given time. Because community associations have reserve funds, those funds build up over time, and when they're available to do a pavement project and it becomes necessary to do that pavement project, that's what that money is there for. It's meant to be spent on a pavement project. And if the timing is right and the money is there, then it's time to do that project. Also, getting specs prepared on the off season, as we discussed, can get you on a contractor's schedule earlier in the year, and that's more ideal than doing it in the heat of the summer for several reasons, and also at the end of the paving season. You don't want to be up rushing to get the project done. And if there's not enough funds available in the reserve, there often can be special assessments. I've been involved in projects where they wanted to get those contractor bids because they wanted to see what sort of gap they needed to make up between what was available in the reserve fund and what they needed to do the project. I have a request to provide with my background and a short bio. So I've been with Kipcon for 15 years. So no, I'm sorry, 13 years. I've been in the industry a little over 35 years. And I am a licensed professional engineer. I started off in the design world, designing communities, very much like yours, and also commercial projects. And I am now with Kipcon, and as you know, most of our work that we do, I still do a fair amount of design work, but we largely deal with community associations and their engineering needs in terms of remediating what they already have as things age or as things need repair. So when you involve an engineer in the remediation process, this is the typical progression of how a project goes. So it begins with evaluation, where we come out to the site, we do a visual evaluation of the surface of the pavement to determine its condition and what the type of remediation that might be needed. Also, as part of that evaluation, we do pavement coring to see what the structure of the pavement is, because we cannot visually determine that. And oftentimes the existing structure of the pavement can determine the method of remediation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The next step would be to prepare, to gather that information from the evaluation and prepare specifications. Specifications include contract drawings, which are the graphical representation of what needs to be done, and a project manual, which lays out the terms, the general terms and the specific terms for the contractor for the project. The project manual also contains the bid form, which we'll talk about a little bit more about. The bid form keeps the contractor quotes comparable to each other. If you just put out without specifications in your request for proposal, as you may have experienced in the past, you may ask, 3 different contractors for a quote on a project, and you get back 3 different answers with 3 different scopes of work, and that's very hard to compare. So using an engineer to prepare specifications is beneficial in that you can see in detail what each contractor will charge for each specific portion of that project. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Bidding is the next step, where we put out the bid package, including those contract drawings and the project manual to contractors, and we get those bids back, we compare them, and we present them to the association, and so they can select a contractor to do the project. Then obviously the work is going to be performed at some point. And there is a process to that as well, which we'll talk about. And then once the pavement's installed, it doesn't end there. There is maintenance that needs to be done so that you can get the full useful life out of your pavement. I have a question here. Do you have a recommendation for percentage increase for asphalt and fuel? Should we anticipate a 10 or 15% increase? That's a very good question. So as part of the when we get the bids back and we analyze the bids, one of the things we do is we add a line item. We add the Kipcon adds in, not the contractor, in a line item increase of between 10 and 20%. So we'll show you what a 10% increase on the project would be and a 20% increase on the project would be, and that contingency amount is typical, we find, across the board for pavement projects. Pavement projects usually have come in with extras somewhere above roughly 15% above base bid. So we add those line items to kind of give you a range, because we don't know what the percentage of those extras will be, because there are unforeseen conditions in a pavement project. There are a lot of things you can't see until that top course is milled off, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But that contingency amount of between 10 and 20% will typically capture things such as base repairs and changes in asphalt price and concrete work that may need to be done where the pavement meets sidewalks. It captures a number of things that are unforeseen, but we find it's typically around 15%. So the beginning of the process is the evaluation, where, as I mentioned, we'll come out to review the level of deterioration in the pavement. There's a couple other things we take a look at. We look at drainage patterns in the pavement. And when we come out to the site, I always recommend that I meet with somebody who's familiar with the community and how where the trouble areas are with the pavement. Because when your engineer comes out and reviews those drainage patterns, although they're looking for areas where there might be runoff problems or ponding water, we can't always visually determine where there is a problem. So I always highly recommend that somebody familiar with the community join me initially to walk through and show me where they have concerns. Another thing we also like to review with the community is where the traffic loads are, meaning when refuse removal trucks come in, they are very, very heavy trucks, and they can often do damage to the pavement. We often see a lot of damage in front of dumpster pads. There are methods of remediation that we can use in those high traffic load areas that can strengthen or reinforce the pavement a bit so that you get a longer life out of it. I also mentioned part of our evaluation is subsurface testing. That always entails for us performing asphalt cores to see what the structure of that pavement is, because that becomes very important in the design of the pavement and ultimately the cost of the project. So asphalt coring is very important. Depending on what the issues are in the community, we may also request that the quarrying contractor perform an informal percolation test in the open core hole to see if there is adequate drainage. If there is standing water beneath asphalt, there are certain techniques we can use to alleviate that situation so that you get a longer life out of your pavement. So some of the types of damage we look for visually when we go out give us an indication of how that pavement is performing and why it's failing in the areas that it's failing. So obviously potholes are a big one. So the biggest enemy to asphalt pavement is water infiltration. And once cracks start to form, once depressions in the pavement go unrepaired, that water starts to infiltrate. And one of the most obvious types of problems with pavement is potholes. And that's when that top wearing course, if you'll remember the pavement layers, first the wearing course chips off, and then you have the exposed base course in the area of the pothole. And then if it stays there long enough, that base course disappears and you're down to your aggregate layer, and it just keeps deteriorating from there. So as part of maintenance, a community may cold patch, have a paver come in and do some cold patch in those potholes. If they're bad enough, as part of maintenance, they may want to do some localized repairs in which a firm comes in or a contractor comes in and cuts out portions of the pavement and patches them with new asphalt. And that would all be part of a maintenance program for a roadway. But once the pavement reaches a certain age and a certain level of deterioration, spending money on maintenance just becomes a losing battle. And you start spending more and more money on maintenance, and you have to look at how much you're spending on maintenance versus how much of that maintenance cost would be alleviated if you went ahead and did and remediated the pavement, because a lot of those maintenance issues that recur over and over and become expensive go away when you have a newer pavement. Another type of crack we see a lot are these open cracks. Now they can form for several reasons. As pavement ages, it shrinks. And the cracks open a little wider every time you go to maintain it. They open in areas of seams where when they lay down the pavement initially, there's a seam between the passes of the screed that have like a just sort of a weak point there, that when the pavement does shrink, those seams open up. There can also be cracks that form in areas of stress in the pavement. There are areas of alligator cracking that can happen where it's almost like these little blocks all over the pavement. But as you can see in this photo, this has been crack sealed several times, and you still have an open crack here because the pavement continues to shrink. So it becomes the maintenance cost and the continual maintenance becomes a losing battle after a while. And one of the most damaging things about the crack is not the crack itself, it's the fact that there's water getting in there and it's doing damage underneath the pavement. One of the things I want to point out as important is that the damage that can be done by water entering pavement is progressive. And if it's let go long enough, the pavement project itself can actually be more expensive, because keep in mind, when we mill off that top course, now you're exposing all the damage that's underneath on that base layer. And that can get expensive when you mill off that top course and you see there's a lot of areas of damage. Now you have to repair the base, and that adds to the cost of the project. And so as that water gets in and deteriorates the base, you're creating more damage that needs to be repaired as part of your project. So here's an example of the alligator cracking I mentioned before. So I'm not sure where in the community this is, but it's obviously in an area where the bearing capacity of the soil has it wasn't strong enough for the traffic that was there. It's either a dump, maybe perhaps in front of a dumpster area, or in an area where the soil bearing capacity is not very good. As you can see, in the area here, there's this edge around the area of alligator cracking, where at one time there was an overlay that was put over that area without repairing it. I am not a big fan of overlays where where they'll come in and they'll just do some profile milling in some localized areas and then put a very thin layer of wearing course over top of everything without milling. And it might look good for a year or two, but after a while, all that deterioration in the original pavement underneath starts to reflect up through that thin asphalt veneer that's on top. And you have the same problems that you have underneath. They don't go away because you put an overlay on it. Without milling and without proper repair and preparation. So in this particular case, you could see where the overlay just broke right off of the original problem. Okay, so we talked about reflective cracks, where if you put new pavement over unrepaired underlying pavement, the cracks that are in the underlying pavement will come through in about a year or two, usually, sometimes not even that long. So it's very important to repair what's underneath before you put something new over top of it. Seam cracks are very common. They are often in areas where like a parking area, a parking bay may meet the main roadway. You see cracks open up along the front of those parking bays a lot. That's because there's a seam there from when the original pavement was installed. And with shrinkage over time, and then with water flowing along that flow line, that crack opens more and more each year. Some other types of cracks that we look for are what's called transverse cracks in the roadway. If you're walking down the roadway, they would be cracks that are kind of perpendicular to your direction of travel, that go from one side of the road to the other, and that's from asphalt shrinkage. So transverse cracks don't always indicate that there's a problem underneath. It may just be a shrinkage of the top course, but they do form after a while. This is another issue that is very, very common. There can be settlement around the catch basins in the roadway. And this happens because when they construct a community and they compact everything in the roadway, the area around the catch basins can be very difficult to get a proper compaction. It's not that the contractor necessarily has done a bad job in every case. It may just be that the type of soil that they're trying to compact is a little more difficult to compact around the outside of the inlet boxes. So this is a very common issue in communities that are doing their first pavement remediation, because all that soil consolidation has happened over time, and now is their chance to repair it as part of a pavement project. So in an area like this, we would call an area like this out to have a full depth repair around this catch basin, where they remove all the pavement layers. They may need to recompact around the box and put in a new full depth pavement. Also, I want to mention that catch basin repairs are actually a part of a pavement project. We consider that part of the pavement project because the condition of the catch basin boxes can affect the performance of the pavement over time. So it's as we come out to do that visual evaluation at the beginning of the project, we can't always see the condition. We can get a general idea by peering into the inlet, but until that steel is removed and that frame is removed by the contractor, then the underlying problems in the catch basin, its structure is more visible. So repair of catch basins is often an extra to the project, and we try to capture it in that 15% that I mentioned as part of the extra contingency in that project. So we generally see the catch basin repairs fall within that contingency. In some cases, though, there is so much damage that's so obvious to the catch basins that we will make it part of the base bid for them to be repaired. Also, changing out what's called the curb piece, which as you can see, it's kind of this metal piece along the curb with the opening here. NJDOT, which is the standards we refer to in our specifications, requires that those open curb pieces be removed and replaced with what's called an eco head. It just has smaller openings in it, and it keeps debris from going into the community's larger debris, like cups and wrappers and branches and things like that can clog the stormwater system, and it just keeps that debris out. So we highly, and then a lot of the community roads are private, so you're not necessarily have to adhere to NJDOT standards, but we always specify that if you have these open heads, that they be replaced with the eco heads, because they do keep a lot of the debris out of your stormwater system and prevent clogs. Also, changing out the steel, the steel grate on the, or I'm sorry, the cast grate on catch basins is also important. They NJDOT specifies what's called a bicycle grate, and if you look at the old style grates, they've got these kind of deep slots in them. Apparently, people riding bicycles can really injure themselves if the wheel gets stuck in there. So the bicycle grates are intended to protect against any sort of injury from a bicyclist riding over the grate. Here's another example of a pavement overlay that was put over aging pavement that didn't work out too well and started raveling after a short period of time. Also, you could see here they have some concrete curb that's deteriorated. So just like catch basins, we look at the curbing when we're doing a pavement project. We as part of our visual observations, we go through and we note the condition of the curb. Whether it be concrete curb or Belgian block curb, to identify areas where the curb is in disrepair and may need to be replaced. In the case of Belgian block curb, it may just be a matter of resetting block that has been knocked loose by plows or people driving over it. But with concrete curb, the whole curb section typically needs to be removed and replaced. And that needs to be included in a pavement project. So we will quantify that amount of curb and put it in the base bid for replacement. I will tell you though, if you're planning a pavement project in the fall and we put together specs in the fall and then we have a pre-construction meeting in the spring, I always recommend that we walk through with the contractor and physically mark out with marking paint which curbs need to be removed, and that we agree on which curbs need to come out and be replaced. And the reason that we do that is because you've now gone through a winter between the specs and the work being done. So that curb quantity that's in the base bid may increase slightly if there was any further damage over the winter. So we talked about testing being part of that visual evaluation of the subsurface conditions, because that can affect the specifications and what the scope of remediation that we recommend. So here's an example of what pavement coring looks like. You could see the gentleman on the left there with the coring apparatus. It is water cooled, so it does. So that center picture you see there with the water is in it isn't a drainage problem. It's just the water from that's used for the equipment. But this is typically what it looks like. It's a 6-inch diameter core that they take. And on the right side, you could see the layers of pavement that have been pulled out of that core section. One of the things we look for is not only the thickness of each layer, the base course and the top course. We also ask the coring contractor to gather information on what type of subbase has been installed, and if they can, determine the depth of that subbase, which is important as well. Also, what we look for is separation between layers of the top course and the base course. Oftentimes when they pull up that core, as it should be, that top course is fused to the base course, which is to me good news. When I see a separation, I get a little concerned because when they go to mill off that top course, if that top course isn't adhered to the base course and they mill it off, there could be a lot of delamination of what's left of that top course from the base course, and there's extra cleanup involved. In some cases, they may have to mill a little deeper in some areas. So what I like to see when they do pavement cores is the core coming up intact, and if there is a separation, that top layer is at a thickness that when they do mill, it will be completely removed and they'll be biting into that base course. So then we prepare the technical specifications, and the graphical and the project manual spell out the type of remediation that's necessary. So it includes things like the design of the pavement, which we don't just pull a design out of the air. There are certain standards that we look at. Residential site improvement standards specify pavement thicknesses. There are municipal requirements for pavement thicknesses. There are also NJDOT standards for asphalt mixes. I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. And also the technical specifications, if there's any sort of sub-base preparation. So as I mentioned, the basic project is the contractor mills 2 inches off the top and puts 2 inches of wearing course back. So in a perfect world, that would be the limits of the project. But because we don't live in a perfect world, and because there are unforeseen conditions in pretty much every pavement project I've done, there are base repairs that need to be done at some in some locations, or else there may be cracks that can be repaired with a crack fabric before the top gets put back down. In some cases, there may be underlying soil bearing capacity issues that are not apparent until they proof roll that base layer, meaning that the contractor will basically drive a very heavy truck over it and see how that pavement flexes, the base course flexes underneath that load, and it may indicate that there are soft spots. In some cases, the wheel of the truck actually goes through the soft spot and makes a rut in the base course. Those are areas that will need full depth repair, where they will dig down not only through the base layer but into the sub base layers. And if they cannot achieve bearing capacity, they'll put down a geotextile fabric, backfill, and then build the full depth pavement on top of that. So that's why those cores become very important. That's why any sort of testing is to gather as much information as we can before we do the specification design is important, because you want to avoid those surprises which translate into the cost of the project. They can't always be avoided, but we try to avoid them as best we can, or have foreknowledge of them, I should say, as best we can. So DOT has these standards for the types of asphalt that should be used, and it's generally what the mills produce. In the past, there were for residential use, there was what was called the Marshall mixes. Now we have what they have sort of a nickname, Super Pave. They're the same materials, but they're a different type of mix, and they are just a little more brittle than the older mixes because they have a lot of recycled asphalt product in them. It's just what's available now. So the contractors do a really nice job. The contractors that we work with that that are quality contractors. They do a really nice job with the newer mixes, and you get a good product in the end. So as I mentioned before, in the project manual is the bid form. Now, the base bid are all the items that we know need to be done. You know you're going to mill off the top course. You know you're going to put top course back. You may know that you have to change out the steel on your catch basins. So everything that we know need to be done as part of that project goes into the base bid. Now, as I mentioned, there are unforeseen conditions in pretty much every pavement project. And the more damaged your pavement is, the more surprises there are. That the unit pricing seeks to capture those incidental items that typically come up in a pavement project, but you don't necessarily know you need yet. So that might include base course repairs, removing and replacing that base course asphalt. It may include excavating and backfill of unsuitable material. It may include that geotextile fabric that I mentioned, and crack repair fabric. It may include repairs of various types of repairs to catch basins. So so again, base bid is what you know needs to be done. The unit pricing we request for typical items that come up as surprises during pavement projects. So we also we as part of the base bid, we list those quantities so that the bids come back consistently. We do ask the contractor to if they disagree with our quantity to let us know if it's not within 5% of what they've estimated. But typically the quantities come back in our bids just as we've presented them. I shouldn't say oftentimes, there are times when I will ask the contractors to provide me with a quantity. So when we begin a project, it's always ideal if the association has the original plans for their community, because that gives us an accurate base for estimating. In older communities, obviously, you don't have those plans readily available, or you don't have a recent survey readily available. So we will oftentimes use satellite imaging, such as Google Earth, to lay out the graphical representation of the roadways. And depending on the topography of the site and several other factors, we may ask the contractor to provide us with an estimate. I always have an idea of what that quantity estimate will be, but I ask the contractors just to verify that everybody is using they're getting similar estimates of quantity. Sometimes if it's a very large community, I have a couple of communities that were very large, we may go out and drone it just to be sure that we're getting an accurate base map as we can possibly to work with. So we talked about the different remediation techniques. Ideally, the project consists of milling off the top course and installing new top course. But oftentimes, and more often than not, I should say, there is some pavement reconstruction that is involved. So items that are additional to the scope of work for a pavement project can include concrete sidewalks, curbing, driveways I mentioned earlier. Now, driveways are a different construction than roadways, but because it's asphalt and because you're getting an asphalt contractor in there anyway, a lot of communities want to perhaps do a simultaneous project with their driveways. If you're going to do driveways as part of an asphalt project, I recommend that you do the driveways first and then do the roadways, just so that you don't have heavy equipment driving in and out over your brand new roadways. That would also go for the same if you're going to do roofing. or any other kind of project that might require heavy equipment, that you get those projects out of the way first before you redo your roadways, just because the residential roadways are not meant for heavy construction loads to constantly be rolling back and forth over them. So it's very important to stage any multiple projects that you have so that the roadways are done last. When they redo driveways, you don't have the same layers that you do on a roadway. Typically, when you do a driveway, you've only got a couple of inches of asphalt there, so you have to demolish and reconstruct the driveway. Traffic control is in this case, I think it's referring to not so much traffic control as directing traffic during the project, but there are some types of speed modification that can be put in, like speed humps. We have a number of clients that on their private roadways want speed humps put in just to slow people down coming through the neighborhood because of children or dangerous curves or what have you. So if you're going to add speed humps to your community, I always check with the township. We always will put together sort of a concept plan of where you might want those speed humps to go, and then we give the township engineer the courtesy of talking, or the courtesy of being able to review and give them any feedback. There are some concerns sometimes in communities that are pass-throughs, where they're not just private roadways that only residents use, but if there might be a main road that goes through, there can be concerns with access for emergency vehicles and response time for emergency vehicles. So it's always very important to check with the municipality before installing any sort of speed hump. So I have a question here. You have mentioned how variations in type of soil can impact pavement repair. Do you look at the type of soil? So yeah, yes and no. There's no way to change the underlying soils on your site, but yes, they are important. So if you have a very sandy soil, the two ends of the spectrum are sand and clay. Sand is very porous, and it compacts nicely, makes a nice base, and it drains well. Clay, on the other end of the spectrum, is squishy. You think of clay, you know, it's squishy, it holds a lot of water. It's in some cases impervious to water, so it can create some drainage issues. So if we're doing a pavement project where there's a lot of clay, we may specify an underlying what's called a capillary break, like some stone or something put underneath the pavement that serves as it allows some voids and some drainage relief between that impervious clay layer and the asphalt above, so that you don't have water sitting directly against your asphalt, between the asphalt and the underlying soil. So yes, very good question. Additional work striping, obviously when they're done, and if you've got parking areas or fire zones that need to be restriped or crosswalks, that's part of the project as well. Drainage can be part of a pavement project. So just a little bit about drainage. So when you have really beat up pavement with a lot of cracks, when it rains, a lot of that rain goes into those cracks, so you don't see a lot of surface water. Once you get brand new pavement, one of the comments and complaints that we receive is that now people see water flowing in the gutters, and it's meant to be that way. Once you put down new pavement, you have a lovely impervious surface, and so when it rains, that water runs off instead of running into the cracks of the pavement. So you have the visual of water running through the gutter, but it's meant to do that. It's meant to be conveyed over the surface of the pavement to the catchment where it gets carried away. So drainage issues, there's a perception that there's now a drainage issue because with the new pavement, but that's not the case. The standard is that 24 hours after the end of a rainfall event, those surfaces should drain completely within 24 hours. So that includes, areas where there's slow running water. There may be some slow running water on the pavement. It has 24 hours is the standard for that to clear off. And if it's raining and you see water, that doesn't mean you have a drainage problem. You have to wait till the rain ends. 24 hours, the pavement should be drained, well drained. Maybe not dry at that point, but well drained. Also, there may be times when additional drainage structures are needed as part of a pavement project. So sometimes we know that going in, if we are aware of, and that's why I said when we come out to do the evaluation, it's very important that we meet with somebody who's familiar with the community, because they can point out areas where they may be having a drainage problem that we can't identify just by looking. So that's the time to try to identify what kind of drainage problems you're having and whether additional drainage design would be required to extend the life of your pavement. That could consist of perhaps adding catch basins. It could consist of putting in perforated under drains where there may be seepage conditions from the underlying soils. There are different types of drainage techniques, drainage improvements that we can implement to alleviate drainage problems within roadways. So here's a sample of what the contract drawings might look like. This is a very small portion, obviously. There's usually a set with several sheets in it. So it shows in plan view the community where the pavement is. Sometimes we may identify areas where we know there's going to be full depth reconstruction that's needed. And it's just a graphical representation. There may be different types of pavement that we use. As I mentioned before, there may be a place where you need more of a reinforced pavement or a thicker pavement where refuse trucks come in and out, or there's truck traffic through the community that needs a different pavement design. So the graphical representation of the project will show that. So you can look and you can see where the limits of the work are and what type of work needs to be done. And then of course there's details that detail what needs to be put back in certain situations, where the limit of work is, where the new pavement adjoins the pavement, the older pavement that's going to remain, how that particular area should be handled. If the contractor ends up having to over excavate areas of poor subgrade material, how should that be handled? So the details specify what needs to be put back when they reconstruct something. This would be an example of a bid summary. I apologize, I don't have an example of a bid form in this particular presentation. But as I mentioned, when we receive the bids back, we put together a summary for you. And it looks somewhat similar to this, where we'll separate out the base contract. And again, it's those items you know need to be done. And from the unit cost section, the items that may need to be done, but you want pricing for them in advance so you know what it might cost you if it needs to be done. And we put that all in spreadsheet form. And as you can see, these are all apples to apples comparison. Every contractor is bidding on the same items so that you can compare the prices. It often will clue me into asking questions. When I receive the bids and I put together this spreadsheet, there sometimes different numbers jump out at me, and I realize either the contractor has underbid or overbid this in some way, and I'll go back to the contractor and say, did you really mean this? I don't share other bids with them, but I'll ask them to take a look at it and just confirm that what the pricing they're giving is what they intended. So a lot of times, if there is a contractor that really wants the project, they may underbid it, and it really jumps out because you see this very low bid. And I will always go back to that contractor and say, just confirm that these numbers are what you intended to put in in your bid. Same thing with a really high bid. I'll give them the courtesy of going back and saying, is this what you really intended? So in selecting a contractor, it's always tempting to just go with the lowest bid on the bid sheet, but there are several factors that we always highly recommend that you consider. One important one is the contractor's schedule. Can he not get to it till the fall? We always ask what the duration of the project will be. Will it be, if every contractor says they can do it in a week, but the low bid says he can't, it'll take him 2 months, that kind of may be a deal killer. Also experience. I will tell you that on the bid list that I have, I only work with contractors that I know that I've worked with in the past, and I know that their work is superior. When we, before we send out any RFPs, I always provide to the property manager, whoever my client contact is with the community, a list of the contractors we intend to use, and that the mix of contractors may change based on where the project is, what other types of related work may need to be done. If I know they have good subs for that particular type of work, they will be included in the bid list. So you have an opportunity to say, no, I don't want to work with that contractor, or here's somebody else that I've worked with in the past. Can you please include them on your bid list? And we're happy to do that. Our proposals say that we'll put out to a minimum of 3 contractors. I was just telling a potential client last night that I generally put RFPs out to at least 5. The reason being is because getting back timely bids, I will tell you that pavement contractors are very, very busy people. So trying to get timely bids can be a little difficult at certain times of the year. So I put out a lot of bids, and I follow up on the bidders to make sure they're still interested in bidding. Oftentimes I'll put out 5 or 7 RFPs, and in the end receive 3 bids that are usable. So I do often, or always I should say, do at least 5 contractors. So experience, as I said, is important. We do ask for references. That's more for the community's benefit. I know the reputation of the people that are on my bid list, or the contractors that are on my bid list. But references are, they show the community what types of projects that have been done by that particular contractor, and if the board would like to follow up on those references, they are there and available for them. I have a question here. There's a difference with pursuing major road street project for a private community versus public roads. If so, what do we need to plan for? Permits, surveys? Okay, that's a good question. So the highways are a completely different type of construction, and on the community association level, it's not really something you would need to worry about. Public roads and private community roads are similar construction, if not identical, because they're made for regular vehicle traffic, and so they tend to be similar. Permits, I will tell you, are in the purview of the contractor. It is the contractor's responsibility to obtain any permits they would need for the work that is specified in the contract. For residential roadways, in my experience, permits are not required. There's been very few cases where the actual asphalt requires any kind of permit. There may be related projects that require permits. If there's any sort of additional work to the pavement project, that involves constructing something that wasn't perhaps there before, that may involve some permitting. But when you are repairing or replacing something in kind, there's usually not a need for those sort of permits. Surveys are always nice. They're not necessary for the basic roadway project. As I mentioned before, we'll often rely on satellite imaging if there's nothing else available. And credential of the engineers. You know, a professional engineer is whether they are a geotech or a site work, their area of expertise, any kind of site work engineer probably has the knowledge base to do a pavement project. So I hope that answers your question. We're up to 10:30, so I'm just going to go quickly through the rest of the presentation here. Oh, and I see it's time for the code word. The code word today is Oscar. Oscar is my cat's name, and he's joining us here today. So the code word is Oscar. Okay, so just real quick, and to wrap up, when we're in the contract administration phase, once you've selected your contractor, we always recommend that you start with a pre-construction meeting. Whether you have us out in the field full-time or you only want us there at key points during the construction project, pre-construction meeting is key. And the attendees at that pre-construction meeting should also always be your engineer, your contractor, and a representative of the association, which is usually the property manager or a board member or board members. And at that pre-construction meeting, we talk about scheduling, we talk about staging of materials, any concerns that the association may have about the progression of that project needs to be brought up at the pre-construction meeting so that everybody understands the progression of the project from the get-go. You can, as I mentioned, you know, once we know the contractor's schedule, we can give you an idea of the key points that in your project that we determine that would be best for us to be on site and to look at the progression of the project. Also, as part of contract administration, we will review the invoices. The invoices are compared back to the base bid. And we recommend or make authorization for payment. Also, when the project is completed, we'll do a walkthrough again with the same players: association, contractor, engineer, and if there are any outstanding items that need to be addressed before the final retainage is released, we'll make a punch list of those items that need to be addressed. So I'm just going to go through really quick. Here's milling. It's very noisy, very messy. This is where they mill off the top course of the pavement. Here's the milling machine. They mill it into the back of the truck and haul it away. Excavation around inlets comes next after milling. They do the inlet repairs and any change out of steel that needs to be done. Here's what pavement or base course reconstruction might look like. The top course is gone, but this area here was very deteriorated, so they replaced the base course in this particular area. You can see the color difference from where they replaced it. If there are cracks in the base course that don't necessarily need to be excavated, we specify that they do crack repair. This is a crack repair material that spans the closed crack in the road before they put the top course down, just to reinforce it so you don't get those reflective cracks that we talked about. Here they're laying down base course. You could see the sub base underneath. They took off all the asphalt in this particular case. They're putting back the base course. Here's some more pavement installation. You can see where it's been rolled here. Here they're doing some hand raking in the corner to make sure the asphalt gets into the corners of the parking areas. And then before they put top course on, they apply tack coat on the top of that repaired sub base. So that, remember we talked about that separation that I don't like to see. This helps everything to adhere and stick together and bond. And then there's the final rolling of the asphalt when they're done. And here's a lovely completed roadway. You can see the seam there along the left where there's kind of a light just a light dust from the roller that does fade. And then here's another roadway here. You can see the seam up the middle. In this particular case, one side of the roadway, just for staging purposes, one side of the roadway was done one day, and then they came back and did the other side of the roadway another day. And although they did a good job with the seam and it's closed, you can see the seam. It's a hot to cold asphalt seam, so it's a little more visible. And then in the end, they do the striping, and you know, they want to replace the striping where they found it in the first place. So we always ask that the contractor either provide a drawing or make note of where the existing striping is so that they can replace it in the end. And then ongoing maintenance, seal coating, crack filling is important part of maintenance. Ongoing observations and can be done when your reserve study is updated. We take a look and we see how the pavement is aging, and we reflect that in your reserve study. There's an example of some crack repair. There's an example of some seal coating. You can see the nice dark, aesthetically pleasing seal coated to the pavement surface over here. And that is the end. I understand that this was offered for continuing ed credits. So you can contact Jody Smallwood. There's her email there, and she can provide you with what you need. Okay, I have a question here. Are you saying seal coating is maintenance? We were always told that seal coating is for aesthetics only. Great question. Depending on what contractor you ask, they will either recommend or not recommend seal coating. So Kipcon usually recommends, if you're going to do seal coating only provides a protection if you do it early and you do it regularly. So we recommend, if you're going to do it, that you apply the first seal coat 2 years after pavement is installed, and then you regularly update it, regularly re-seal coat it every 5 years thereafter. So you have to do it early, and you have to be consistent with it. Older pavement, seal coating does nothing. That's when it's just aesthetics. If you want a darker looking pavement, you can seal coat it, but you're not getting the benefit of what seal coating is intended to do if you seal coat older pavement. Also, be aware that when you seal coat a pavement and a snow plow in the winter, it gets like a white streaks where the plow blade hits it. You see that on seal coated driveways very often. You know, it's really a matter of personal preference if you want to seal coat your older pavement or not. It's really an aesthetic thing for older pavement. Okay. That's all the questions. Any other questions? And if you have any other questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to discuss it with you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
And have a great day.
Yeah, this was really good. Thank you very much.
I'm glad it was helpful.
Good.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That helpful?